Satoru Gojo and Suguru Geto, arguably two of the strongest characters in the whole of Jujutsu Kaisen, and honestly, two of the biggest fan favorites. But now that season 2 is here, we're going to be asking a lot of questions about both of them, as this is really an arc about them, how they changed, and where they went in the series. But it feels fair to say that one of the bigger questions that's going to emerge here is which one of them is stronger? And that's a bit interesting to answer in this time period when they were both students. But before we begin, let's be clear. We're going to be getting into some stuff for Shibuya Incident, Hidden Inventory, and Premature Death. I'm going to be keeping it light spoilers, but there will be spoilers in this video. So if you don't want that, go ahead and bow out now. Are we good? Let's go. I think when it comes to the progress that both Geto and Gojo made, there is significant differences between what their adult selves can do and what they can do in Hidden Inventory. And this makes sense. They are both students, and as such, they're both significantly weaker than they would later be. I mean, their whole understanding of Jujutsu in the world is going to change, especially in this arc. But if we look at them right now, what do they have, what can they use, and which of them is actually the strongest? Let's start with Gojo. Gojo is still born with the 6 eyes and has his limitless curse technique. He's basically the prophesized one that most of the Jujutsu world always keeps an eye on whenever one of them appears. And because of that, he does have a streak of arrogance here, but it's not unwarranted. The 6 eyes basically give him all of the informational data that you would need for the Jujutsu world, and the limitless is one of the strongest techniques, basically allowing one to control the concept of infinity. But here, Gojo is deprived of some of the abilities that we know him to be able to use. In particular, we know that he can use the Limitless for defense, same as he does later in the series, but he can't use it all the time. Instead, it is actually something he has to concentrate on, making it much, much weaker than it previously was. I mean, after all, it goes from basically being an unlimited force field to a shield that he has to constantly maneuver and keep track of. And because of that, it really weakens him overall. It also affects his ability to control his offense, because his control of his ability has only thus far extended to Azure Blue. Now, Blue, in case you don't know, because he does use it a lot in the series, but not as such because it's not named. Like, he uses it a lot, but he doesn't actually call out the name for it. And basically, it's his pulling technique, whether that's pulling people towards him or using a blue black hole, as it might be, to suck things in a general direction or toward the point. That is still very powerful, but it's all he has. He does not have the ability to use reverse curse technique in this season, at least maybe not yet. Because of that, he does not have access to Red Glow, his most offensive option. And you can also count out Hollow Purple, because Hollow Purple required both the use of blue and red. So he's much weaker overall than he previously was. We also know for a fact that while he's been experimenting with teleportation, it's not as much of a factor for him right now. So with that in mind, what we then have to look at is Geto. And Geto is interesting, because while he is one of the most fluid Jujutsu users throughout the whole series, with a grasp on it that probably equals Gojo's, he doesn't have a large change in his power. His power is cursed spirit manipulation. Essentially, whenever he exercises a spirit, it turns into a black ball, and he eats that black ball, and then he then gets the ability to resummon that spirit as a soldier that fights for him. Now, overall, this is a really strong ability, and it always was. Because it's not like the Limitless, where it really has to be functioning on all cylinders to be the godlike power that it is, he just has to utilize it. It's much stronger even at its infancy stage right now than it initially was when we first saw it. There's relatively no change, although obviously the man that uses it has changed quite a bit. In line with this, the biggest change is the number of cursed spirits he has access to. Obviously, he was not preparing for a war at the time of Hidden Inventory, so he has far less to use than he did during JJK0. But that doesn't mean he has none, and his arsenal is not devoid of cool abilities. It also doesn't mean that he's devoid of cool ways to use them. We mostly saw him use blanket ability with JJK Zero, launching them out to suppress or hold people, or to cover an entire area in cursed spirits as a distraction. But Geto in Hidden Inventory often uses them to mix with martial combat. This is actually very interesting, as it has been a speculation for many that Gojo watched Geto train in this fighting style and then went ahead and trained Megami in it for much the same reason. People assume when you have a summoning ability that you're weaker at close combat. Geto pretty much saw this and exploited it as a weakness in other people's fighting style, because he would lure them in to get close and then just beat the absolute living sense out of them. And that made him very powerful. Not to mention, he could still use his cursed spirits like regular summons, sending them in to do massive damage. He could use them for reconnaissance. There's really not really any limit to what he can do with his cursed spirits. He just has to have them in his inventory. And we can't even begin to speculate on all the different things he can do with them because we don't know all of the different abilities that each cursed spirit has. So when we take these factors into consideration, who comes out stronger? I mean, it would be fairly obvious that the Limitless is obviously a stronger technique, but because Geto doesn't have anywhere to go, it's clear to see that without a domain expansion, which neither of them have at this point, Geto is the stronger sorcerer, if only because his ability does not evolve. He just increases the amount he has access to. You can also argue that his maximum technique is an amplification of the power, but it is clearly stated that it's just its heightened form. And that's actually the funny thing about those maximum abilities. They're not like a domain expansion, they're not refinement or changing of a concept, they're just pushing it to its absolute limit. So Geto is technically stronger in this time period, but we obviously know that won't last, and exploring how that changes is a big deal in Hidden Inventory. But let me know which one you thought was stronger, and who would you want to win in a fight between them in this time period. That's all for now.